How's it going, boys and girls? My name is Michael SK, and welcome back to the Eden of Grisaia. So in the last episode, they were beginning or continuing, or whatever you want to call it, their Simon Says game with Thanatos. And of course, Michiru failed and died pretty much. So Machina and Sachi went on ahead to the destination, and they went on to the next part of the test, which was a bomb defusal test, which was pretty much pointed directly at Sachi, since she's the only one with experience with bombs. Yeah, so she defused the fake bomb. It was actually a fake. And now they have a letter that they need to go give to Michiru as their next test, and they have an hour to do so. And I'm pretty sure that's way more time than they need, but I don't know. Alright, let's get going. I'm tired of hearing these footsteps. After nearly shouting themselves hoarse, the two girls finally found the individual they were looking for in a truly piteous state. Yep. Really seems like it. The night before, Michiru had gluttonously gobbled down great quantities of fried fish, and after a hearty breakfast, she'd set off running. It was hardly surprising that she was now lying on her side by the road, vomiting loudly. Her eyes were glazed and unfocused. Her body was totally immobile. She resembled nothing so much as a beached sea mammal. Amane was standing a few feet away, gingerly poking at her with a stick. That's honestly gotta fucking hurt if you're throwing up that much.
はい、そしてこれが新しい指令です。この手紙をミチル様に渡せとタナトスさんが。ほら、チルチル、しっかりするのよ。ディシ、ディシ。
Yes, let us smack around the one who's dying. With all the tenderness of an interrogator slapping their prisoner awake in the middle of a torture session, Machina pulled Michiru up off the ground and shoved the letter in her face.
ほら、これ見るのよ。うわ。
They'd now received their third mission of the day. Its nature was quite simple. The envelope contained a single map that seemed to have been printed on a photocopier. Someone had circled a part of it in red pen, and then jotted down a note in the margins of the page. Proceed to the designated location within the time you've been allotted.
安心してください。ここは地球ですよ、ミチル様。お気を確かに。
I'm glad to hear we're on planet Earth.
いやいやいや、そういうことじゃなくてね。で、うわ、なんかミチル様臭い。
Oh, that's gross.
臭いとか言うな。言われなくても分かってるわよ。吐いちゃったんだから仕方ないでしょ。もう。女の子ってさ。 臭いって言われるのは何気に傷つくよね。
I believe it.
そうじゃなくて、この地図の場所はどこなのって。なぜ伝わらないこの思い。恋愛にも似たもどかしさが私の胸を締め付けてるわよ。
Yeah?
それってただの胸焼けじゃん。つか、なんで今さら地図？また携帯で誘導すればいいじゃんね。
Yeah, I would strongly believe that she's got wicked heartburn due to all that throwing up she did.
地図がちゃんと読めるかのテストとか？地図なんて誰でも読めるんじゃん？
Huh. I don't know, guys. Come on.
それを言ったら、ラリーにナビはいらないって話になるよね。指定場所は山の中でしょうか。ほぼ一本道ですし、迷いようがないのでは？
Retrieving a curvimeter? I have no idea what the fuck that is. From the pocket of her skirt, Sachi began to move it along the winding road on their map. I have no idea what that is. I've never heard of this tool. Maybe I'm just an idiot.
現在位置から約40キロ前後の距離と思われます。私この道知ってるわ。
Their new destination was over in the next prefecture, separated by a mountain from their current location. It wasn't far from the farm that supplied eggs and chicken to the restaurant Amane's parents ran. For a while, she'd driven out there every morning. At first, those trips had been on the restaurant's motorcycle. After getting her driver's license, she'd taken their mini truck instead. Day in and day out, in rain and snow, she'd sped out there and back, battling the early bird street racers who used it as their personal practice track.
まずいな。ここって電車の駅もなければバスも1時間に1本の山の中だよ。行くとしたら車かバイクしか。
タクシーなら間に合うんじゃ。
残り時間が50分じゃタクシーでも無理じゃないかな。
Given the time you'd lose to traffic signals and such, traveling 40 kilometers in 50 minutes wasn't easy. You'd have to be averaging about 70 kilometers per hour. She could try and head home and borrow a ride from her parents, but given their time limit, it didn't seem too realistic. As Amane racked her brains, I almost said tracked her brains, for a better solution, a rundown store across the street happened to catch her eye. It was a used car dealership with a small sign advertising cars for rent.
そうか、借りるって手もあるな。みんな、お金いくら持ってる？
I'd assume not that much to rent a fucking car.
8200円ですね。2800円。私は24557円。足りるかな？マキナは？
ちょっと待ってね。12万6400円？あとはカードになっちゃうけど、カードは多分凍結されてるのよさ。
That's quite a bit of money right there.
まあ、これだけあれば十分か。
Yeah, maybe. Just maybe. Generally speaking, you shouldn't expect too much from a rental car. It's a temporary means of transportation, nothing more. Most places aren't going to lend out flashy sports cars or anything, and given the cost of insuring expensive vehicles, you'll pay way more for high-performance rides. Also, when you're poking around a sleepy dealership next to the highway that's clearly run by some local landowner's second son as a tax shelter for his dad, there's really no point in even hoping for something decent. As Amane looked over the various cars lined up in the lot, it was all she could do to keep from groaning in dismay. Everywhere she turned, she saw ancient hatchbacks and coupes from 20 or 30 years ago, and they were mostly beaters in visibly poor condition.
贅沢は言ってられないのは分かってるけどさ。
Shaking her head, she turned toward the prefab hut that served as the dealership, intending to ask if there were any cars that could drive off I'm getting confused. Any cars they could drive off in immediately. Sorry about that. I get tongue twisted. The lone employee inside, however, was in the middle of a phone call.
はい。ちょうどお見えになられました。
Ah, I see they're expecting us. After glancing briefly through the window at her face, the woman put down the phone and said, "You're Suo Amane, correct?"
お車の代金はすでにいただいておりますので、どれでもお好きな車をお選びください。
What the fuck?
はい？どういうこと？
この状況でレンタカーに目をつけるのはタナトスさんに予想されてたってこと？
予想というか、車を借りなきゃクリアできない条件を出したのはタナトスさんなんだし、最初からそう仕組まれてるって感じでしょうか。
なるほどね。タナトスさんらしいというかなんというか。つーかさ、好きなの選べってのはありがたいんだけど。
Isn't there like a back room full of really good cars? None of these old cars look particularly appealing, to be honest. They had plenty of mini trucks, mainly Mazda motor cabs and Nizuki Garis, a number of sedans, including 4 hardtop Nissan Gladius and a Laurel HT 2000 SGX, and a row of hatchbacks, such as a Mazda Familio XGs and non-turbo Honda City models. There's a lot of names here that just don't sound right saying because they're trying to cover things up. In other words, there wasn't a single car packing the sort of power they required.
唯一スポーツカーっぽいのはパルサーのミラの X1 か。せめて GTIR だったらな。
You could technically call the X1 a hot hatch, but this X1E variant had a non-turbo OHC 16-valve 1500cc engine, meaning it was basically a car for old ladies. Well, it did have 97 horsepower, what the fuck? It's like nothing. Although, it really isn't. Although that wasn't anything special for its size, nothing else in this junkyard could really compare. But just as she was about to select the X1, Amane sensed something out of place at her side. The source of this feeling seemed to be God fucking damn it. A Toyota Jewett sitting next to the Bolster in the hatchback corner.
あれ？このジュエット、もしかして。
Could it be a Taihatsu Nutoria? She hadn't noticed at first because it was painted dark green, but it looked a bit like
クロスフォー。
Mud flaps hung loosely behind the tires. She could see a roll cage inside the passenger compartment. The back seat had been removed entirely. Trying to slow her racing heart, Amane circled behind the car, and on its rear end found the X4 logo along with the TRS sticker of the Taihatsu Racing Service. To think I'd find you in a place like this? It felt something like running into a dear old friend at a train station. Almost as if it had been waiting there for years, just for her. Overwhelmed by shock and joy, Amane embraced the car with tears in her eyes. Sorry guys, I'm really tongue-twisted. Looks like we're taking this bad boy out. Fucking Toyota, not Toyota. I mean, come on, if you're gonna cover it up, don't make it sound the same. Irritated by the trembling of her own hand, she hurriedly filled out the rental paperwork, which would probably take a lot more time than the time they're really allotted, but whatever, this is fiction at its best. By the time the woman returned her license and handed her the keys, she'd managed to calm down at least a little. So what does this thing look like? The Taihatsu Notoria X4. To be certain, its endearingly round face and cheap mini-car style interior made it the very picture of an old lady vehicle, but this unamusing appearance belied its true identity. A genuine sports car boasting a 120 horsepower twin-turbo high-boost engine and an overall weight of only 840 kilograms. In accordance with the rules for rally racing, its engine displacement came in at a rather unusual 713cc, but an obsessive focus on cutting weight, even the AC and audio system were optional, meant it had more than enough power. It was, in short, a micro monster, ideally suited to zipping along mountain roads and with lots of tight corners. And its granny mobile exterior appealed to its fans, who often covered the seats in white lace to play up the wolf in sheep's clothing angle.
エンジンルームの排熱が悪いのかな。水温の上がりが早い。
When she pressed down on the accelerator to see what would happen, the RPM rose only sluggishly, suggesting the engine's turbines were ridiculously large. The numbers kept ticking up slowly, almost as if the fuel mixture was overly rich. But as soon as the engine reached 5,000 RPM, the tachometer needle jumped fiercely upward, and the boost gauge shot up to 2.0 kilo... What the fuck is that? Sorry, I don't remember my units. It'll come to me.
ドピーキーだな。美味しいところは5000から8000の間かな。
With a car like this, you wanted to kick the clutch on even the tightest corners. But given how lightweight it was, if you happen to bump into something while turning into the curve, God only knows where you'd end up landing. At the same time, she'd have to make sure not to decelerate or let the RPM needle fall too much. On the uphill curves in particular, there'd be a real danger of the engine stalling if her entry was anything less than perfect.
これ結構やばい車かも。
Jesus Christ, it sounds very tricky in all honesty.
ほらチルチル車に乗るのよ。私乗らない絶対乗らない。胸の横にはもう絶対乗らないって決めたの。別に私じゃなくてもいいでしょ。マキナあんたが行きなさ
And Michiru is really having a bad day.
そうは言ってもタナトスさんの指示は松島みちるって言ってたのよ。だからチルチルが行かなきゃダメなのよ。
Maybe this is a test that they have to get through all these things while carrying someone.
なんで私を指定したのよ。
知らん。
みちる様、あまりわがままをおっしゃらないでください。後で好きなお菓子買ってあげますから。
子供じゃあるまいし、そんな言葉に騙されないわよ。
いらないんですか、お菓子。
何買ってくれるのよ。
何でもいいですよ。一つだけなら何でも好きなの買ってあげます。
どうでもいいけど早くしてくれる？時間ないんだけど。
Yeah, they really don't.
分かったわよ。乗ればいいんでしょ。乗れば。
というわけでみちる様の快諾が得られたところでよろしくお願いします、あまねさん。
With this, Sachi handed over Thanatos' phone, currently displaying an analog stopwatch. Yeah, I didn't say anything wrong there. I was worried. An analog stopwatch. The time they had remaining was displayed in a separate counter on the bottom of the screen. Amane promptly jammed it into one of the car's cup holders.
じゃあ行ってくる。ごめんね。人乗せると重くなっちゃうから。とりあえずみちるだけ連れてく。
I just noticed she looks really weird trying to wink.
ママねえ、気をつけるのよ。
分かってる。
Nodding to Makina, Amane reached out and started the stopwatch timer.
タイマーがゼロになったらスタートするよ。ほら、ちゃんとベルトした？あばね、私まだお腹の具合が。
Oh man, this is gonna suck.
いい加減もう全部吐いちゃったでしょ。時間がないのよ。最初はゆっくり行くから我慢して。
Yeah, they gotta get going. Moving the short stroke shifter to put the car in first gear, Amane glanced behind her, then eased her car's round nose toward the main road outside the lot. Flipping on her turn signal, she hit the brakes on the slanting sidewalk ramp, and keeping the car in a splinter-style leaning whole shot stance, pushed the engine up to 5,000 or up toward 5,000 RPM. On the verge of reaching the power band, she paused to double-check the area around her.
後方よし、前方よし、もう一度後方よし。行くよ、みちる。ゆっくり行くんでしょ。ゆっくり行くって言ったよね。
No.
私とみちるでゆっくりの解釈が少し違うかもしれないね。5、4、3、2。やっぱ降りる。下ろして。もう遅いっての。ゼロ。
Wait, what happened to 1? The very instant her stopwatch finished counting down, Amane roughly engaged the clutch. The compact cross transmission let out a distinctive high-pitched whine. In less than 3 seconds, she'd burned right through first gear. When she released the accelerator pedal and stepped on the clutch, exhaust from the turbines escaped audibly through the wastegate. Quickly moving the shift knob, she stepped down on the accelerator once again, and in no time at all, she'd blown through second gear as well. With a racing cross transmission like this one, the gap to third gear was wide, but fourth and fifth would come easily afterward. And even when changing gears, the engine kept moving at 7,500 RPM, allowing for steady acceleration.
おお、軽いせいかな。なんかポコポコ跳ねちゃうけど、いいぞ、いける。下ろして。私は行きたくない。
Michiru screamed. The engine howled, and the car rushed down the road carrying two foolish young women in very different states of mind. Thanatos had instructed them to bring Matsushima Michiru to the designated point within the allotted time. Letting her out clearly wasn't an option. As the city streets flew past, all Michiru could do was wail in distress. Amane steered them through a series of back roads to the foot of the mountain they needed to cross. There she stopped the car and got out to examine it. Lovely. As soon as the vehicle came to a halt, Michiru tumbled out of it, grabbed her mouth, and began to retch once more. By now, she'd fully expelled the contents of her stomach, so only acid came up her throat. Ah, damn. Now that's terrible, actually. Watching her unfortunate friend out of the corner of her eye, Amane squatted down next to their car and checked the condition of its tires. S tires like these were designed for racing, but they had a nasty tendency to lose their grip entirely when they got worn out.
大丈夫。タイヤはまだ生きてる。いい感じに熱が入ってドロドロだよ。そうかい。そいつはよかったわね。私の胃もドロドロだわよ。もう着いたの。何言ってんの？ここからが本番じゃない。嘘でしょ。もう無理。吐いても何も出ないわよ。大丈夫。吐くだけ吐いて辛いのを通り越したら今度はだんだん気持ちよくなってくるから。それってさ、脳がこれ以上はやばいって判断してんじゃないの？ここからならあと30分もかからないからすぐに終わるって。
Yeah, but that's still a lot of time that you have to wait until all this is over.
汁が車が
Had this girl puked out her own brain fluid somehow? For Michiru's sake, she clearly needed to finish this as quickly as possible. Before moving into serious mode, Amane flipped the intercooler sprayer switch, hoping to lower its temperature somewhat. Generally speaking, you always wanted to keep your battery warm and your motor as cool as possible. Bursts of cooling helped keep the air flowing into your engine stay dense, allowing for a greater concentration of oxygen in the air-fuel mixture, regaining you some of the power you'd lost due to heat. That said, engines tended to return to their normal temperature within a few minutes of being cooled, so this sort of procedure was only marginally useful. But Amane always thought the acceleration felt a bit more responsive for a while afterward, so it wasn't something she could totally dismiss. After one quick final check of the car's condition, she glanced at her watch. 23 minutes were left. Even for Amane, getting past this mountain in that amount of time wasn't going to be easy.
というわけで、ここからは本気で行くよ。本気って、じゃあ今までのは何だったの？今までっていうか、私隣に人を乗せて本気で走るのはこれが初めてだよ。大丈夫。信じてもらうしかないかな。まあホームコースだし大丈夫でしょ。
Well, I guess it wouldn't be an episode of Michael SK reads Grisaia stuff if I wasn't skipping lines. Before Amane came to Mihama, she was helping out her family with their business, and she'd always taken this exact road over the mountain to pick up eggs from a poultry farm on the other side. Back then, her best time with the restaurant's mini truck was 27 minutes and 32.07 seconds. Based on that, they just weren't going to make it. But even so, behind the wheel of this car, she was definitely going to manage somehow. The X4 had been designed from the ground up to complete and rally races on public roads, and for some time after its debut, nothing could compare to its power. Amane had the greatest possible confidence in it. Though it didn't weigh any more than an average mini truck, its engines had real horsepower, and rather than the 8-ply tires that you'd find on an average mini, it had road-legal S tires ideal for high-speed maneuvers. Firmly fastening her 4-point harness and pressing her hips against the back of her seat, Amane switched herself into time attack mode.
3、2、1、0、start!
Synchronizing with the countdown on her tachometer, the phone sitting on her dashboard, she waited for the second hand to hit 0, then began the race. A sudden burst of power sent them shooting forward. Some of it escaped to either side, making the X4's frame tremble and groan. As the car accelerated explosively, its 4 shallow tread, high-performance tires tore at the road surface. Jesus Christ, there's so much to say. When she turned the steering wheel, Amane sensed through her seat that its weight had shifted onto the outer rear tire. And just from the way the car moved, she could tell the exact condition of every tire.
いいぞ、加速が戻ってる。いっけ、クロス4!
It felt as if her brain was melting, but not in a bad way. But Michiru's brain's melting, and in a bad way. For Suo Amane, acceleration was something like a narcotic. As a baby, she'd sat on her father's knee and reveled in the speed of his car. Sorry about that. A part of her associated the sound of an engine with the comfort of the womb. The faster she went, the closer she felt to heaven. Amane spent a lot of time behind the wheel of a front-heavy truck with a short wheelbase and little power. Its floppy chassis, and unforgiving handling had taught her how to control the distribution of weight across her tires. And of course, she'd driven this road countless times under all possible conditions. When you threw in a genuinely powerful, maneuverable car like this one, it was almost unfair to everybody else, honestly.
いいぞ、ぐいぐい登る。やっぱターボってすごいな。足もしっとりしててよく動く。無駄に硬いだけの足より姿勢が作りやすい。
The key to success lay in this early uphill section, where her technical skills could gain her a few precious seconds here and there. It would essentially decide her total time. And the second half was downhill with a lot of straightaways, so the power of her car would be the only relevant factor. She had to gain as much time as she possibly could before then. After barreling through a sharp right turn at the top of third gear, she threw the car into fourth while approaching the first checkpoint, a small store that sold general goods to campers. She'd gotten through the first section more than 4 seconds ahead of her best mini-truck time. The next problem was a small jumping spot just past the bridge over the Ryogoku River. If you were going too fast when you hit that point, all 4 of your wheels would leave the road and you'd end up losing speed. Better to ease up on the throttle instead. Apart from the hairpin turns, she didn't allow her tires to slide around. No reason to let any power escape to the side when it could be pushing you forward instead. By the next checkpoint, a vending machine by the local liquor store, she gained another 2.5 seconds, a very nice pace. But just as Amane was thrilling at the prospect of victory, the tail of another car appeared in front of her. Yeah, we are on public roads. The fuck is this shit? The vehicle in question was a Bugatti, god fucking damn it, Byron. By all accounts, the single most powerful super sports car in the world. As for the man driving this internationally famous machine, for the purpose of this episode, let us give him the name Beak Nose. God only knows what exactly this individual did for a living, but he routinely purchased the most powerful cars he possibly could out of a rather inane desire to arrive at his friends' parties as quickly as humanly possible. He'd only recently gotten his hands on the godlike, incredibly expensive monster he was currently driving. Naturally enough, he'd been on cloud 9 for weeks.
Yeah, なんやろな。これ乗っとると10万羽が来ても負ける気せえへんわ。やっぱ最強の車の条件言うんは価格と馬力と運転のしやすさやんな。
In short, having obtained this divine gift, the beak-nosed man was totally drunk on its power. But just a moment ago, he noticed a small family car on the road behind him. He was trying not to burn too much gas or wear out his tires, but the man was still moving at a very decent clip. So when he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw that unamusing little vehicle approaching, he was dumbfounded.
嘘やろ？どっから出てきてんあの車？つかなんで追いついてこれねんきしょいわ。よっしゃ！このバイロン様の本気いうやつをちょいと見せつけてるかいな。
On even the briefest of straightaways, all you had to do was press down on the accelerator, and the Byron would accelerate as much as you wanted. On Japan's narrow highways, however, you couldn't keep the accelerator all the way down for even a single second. The next corner would be right in front of you in the blink of an eye. This is a really weird section here. And this was an ungodly expensive car, and it had power in proportion to its cost. Beak Nose's confidence was absolute. Certain that he'd left the small interloper far behind, he glanced into his mirror, only to find that the distance between them had actually shrunk. He could feel the hairs on the back of his neck standing up.
嘘やん！なんでやねん！つかあれ何？あんなんお前親戚の姉ちゃんが駅まで送ってったらかいう時に乗る車やんけ。
But for some reason, every time he went around a corner, it was getting closer and closer. How could a granny mobile like that be chasing down a Byron? It didn't make the slightest damn sense.
といえばかといえばバイロンやぞ。なんでやねんな。
Reality was bearing steadily down on him. but it was difficult for Beak Nose to accept. Whenever he touched the brake pedal to approach a corner, the endearing grilled face of the X4 grew larger and larger in his rearview mirror. And its driver was taking advantage of the car's low weight to hit the brakes much later than him, more than the compensating for their difference in horsepower. Beak Nose had forgotten one crucial advantage that any motor vehicle could possess: the nimbleness of a featherweight.
嘘やバイロンやねんぞ
Fucking Bugatti. By smugly assuming that expensive technology could render him invincible, the man had invited his own doom. To Beak Nose, my bad. The dark green vehicle in his rearview mirror was no longer just a car. It was a Mitsubishi A6M fighter plane on the tail of his F4U Corsair, an enemy he couldn't shake off no matter how he squirmed.
あれはゼロやゼロはまだ生きとったんや
Zero was riding his ass. For Beak Nose, who'd grown up hearing his American grandfather's stories about his days as a fire pilot, the thought was enough to fill him with absolute terror. A trickle of cold sweat ran down his spine in combination with the psychological pressure bearing down on him, and slowed his reaction time slightly. With the next corner approaching far too quickly, Beak Nose hurriedly slammed on his brakes. The pedal vibrated beneath his feet as the electronic ABS activated. When he finally moved his steering wheel, the Byron obediently turned its nose inward, but it was already too late. In the very next instant, the dark green Zero had pushed its goofy little snout into the slight gap he'd left on the inside of the curve.
マジか危ないやんけ
Just as these words left Beak Nose's mouth, he heard a rush of exhaust from the X4's wastegate as the driver changed gears. The sound was very, very close. Oh no, they're right next to me, we're gonna collide! The Byron had only just changed its bearing, and given its unusual body, Beak Nose didn't have a precise sense of how much space there was between the two vehicles. The fear of a high-speed collision left his hands frozen on the wheel.
あかん曲がりきれん
Once again, he was forced to slam down on the brakes, this time even harder than before. The Byron's speedometer, my bad needle, dropped rapidly. Lovely noises indeed. In a flash of an eye, the dark green devil slipped ruthlessly past him. It felt as if a murderous creature had lunged by with an awful smirk on its face, after swinging a bloody knife at his throat. His will to fight utterly broken, Beak Nose sat like a statue, my bad, in his luxurious seat. After a moment, he managed to swallow. The adrenaline had drained from his body, and shivers were running down his spine. His foot eased off the accelerator slowly and quietly. He pulled over into the shoulder. Poor guy. As his hands left the steering wheel, he realized they were trembling. It felt as if he'd just awoken from a terrible nightmare. But he knew the truth. The devilish thing, the dark green Zero, was all too real. He'd met a monster and survived. His mind was full of both relief and terror. Wrapping his arms tightly around his leather steering wheel, Beak Nose leaned forward and quietly wept. What a poor guy. All right, we're gonna end it there. I'm pretty sure they're reaching their destination. They have to be. So we'll end it here. The dark green Zero. Now know what that means. We'll continue on next time. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, leave a like and subscribe for all that sweet jazz. And I'll see you guys in the next episode.